Hey, JulesBlessedVegan, and as always, welcome to my channel. And for those of you who are new, I know you can benefit. I want to talk about why you should go vegan if you're not vegan already, or go ahead and celebrate if you are. This is actually from vegan.com, making vegan easy. It's a lot of work in my experience, but you know, there's levels of vegan. There's junk food vegan. That's easy. Buy and eat junk you want as long as there's no animals and eat it. And then there's plant-based vegan, and that's everything without salt, oil, or sugar. And it does take some effort. I think in a way the most effort is raw, which seems ironic. But there's a lot of food prep in trying to chop up that salad and get those vegetables ready and get the fruit ready and you know, make sure you're not overdoing overt plant-based fats. And to me it's a lot, but I mean, my gosh, it's so worth it, right? For the hair alone. For the hair alone. You'll have to decide for you. Anyway, I'm going to share a fantastic article in the description of this video. I don't know, this one seems a little long. I'm kind of taken aback by the photo that they have because it looks like French fries with cheese and bacon. And I'm certain that it isn't, but I think they're just trying to explain how easy it is to mimic food that's typical. I don't prefer to because it generally takes chemicals to do it, right? I mean, the occasional real cheese, the occasional egg, even the occasional piece of meat if you had to, but keeping it authentic would probably be better than the chronic input of chemical-laden vegan food, right? So this is by Eric Marcus. Why go vegan? The elevator pitch, laying out the best reasons to go vegan, crams several compelling points into just a few seconds. It goes something like this. This is like the typical, this is why you need to be vegan. A vegan lifestyle prevents a tremendous amount of animal slaughter and suffering and offers a potent way to shrink our environmental footprint, especially in regard to climate change. And a well-planned vegan diet can fuel the highest levels of fitness while reducing our risk of various chronic diseases. Plus, the food is insanely delicious and it becomes more widely available every year. So, like, that's the standard. If you're content with that, turn off the video. Good luck with veganism. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to share. The above sentence gets us off to a nice start, but they don't begin to do the subject justice. Indeed, getting up to speed on every important reason to go vegan would require months, if not years, of reading, because it's already been like 4 years that I've been looking into this and learning it and doing it, and I've barely scraped the surface, right? You'd have to explore topics like plant-based nutrition, animal rights philosophy, and the exploitation of slaughterhouse workers. You'd also need to delve into the damage the meat industry inflicts on human health and the environment. There are dozens of other relevant subjects to explore, but you get the idea. That said, we have to start somewhere. Learning the essentials doesn't take long. This essay explains the strongest reasons to go vegan, and you can finish it in under an hour. Hopefully 20 minutes. As we're about to see, ridding your diet of animal products delivers remarkable benefits. You may never encounter a topic more worthy of your attention. Number 1, defining a vegan diet. Because remember, vegan is a philosophy. It's trying to protect sentient beings who can't stand up for themselves. It's not food. The food is the plant-based part. But let's see what it says. Vegan diets exclude all food produced by or derived from animals, meat, fish, dairy products, eggs, and honey. And honey's a little controversial. But yeah, the bees aren't making the honey for our consumption. And it says it can take 12 worker bees, like their whole brief time on the planet, to make 1 teaspoon of honey. So at the very least, if you choose to justify honey, rejoice in every drop. My gosh, rejoice in every drop. Conversely, you can define veganism as a diet based entirely on plants. And again, this isn't true. Veganism is a movement to protect sentient beings. So I'm a little confused by this, but let's keep going. Many vegans go beyond diet to remove animal exploitation from their entire lifestyle. They'll avoid clothing made of wool and won't buy leather furniture, nor will they buy cosmetics tested on animals or visit zoos. While such steps deserve consideration, to keep this essay concise, I'm going to focus entirely on diet, the virtues of a plant-based diet. Even if this essay doesn't persuade you to go vegan, it may inspire you to gravitate toward a plant-based diet. While vegan diets exclude all animal products, plant-based diets have some wiggle room. If you see the appeal of going vegan but don't feel gung-ho about it, plant-based diets offer an easily reachable middle ground. Pretty much every food politics writer worth taking seriously include Michael Pollan, Mark Bittman, Eric Schlosser, advocates diets based heavily on plants. All it takes to go plant-based is to make a point of eating vegan foods whenever convenient. You can follow a plant-based diet and still eat Thanksgiving turkey or a summer barbecue. Really? I'm so confused. Perhaps the best reason to go plant-based involves the lack of sensible counter-argument. In all my years writing about food politics, I've never once seen anyone, other than a few paleo diet fanatics, deny the advantages of eating mostly plants. Eating more fruit and vegetables can significantly reduce risks of chronic disease, and that's a hyperlink if you want to read more. And of course, plant-based diets also keep farm animals from slaughter while simultaneously protecting the environment. Yes, please. Shifting to a plant-based diet often initiates a virtuous cycle. By discovering one healthy and delicious food after another, you'll inevitably trigger a cascade of positive dietary changes. The joy of exploring plant-based foods. When you regularly try new vegan foods, the ones you like best quickly become part of your everyday diet. So, as time goes by, your food choices will likely move in a vegan direction without any concerted effort on your part. Plenty of current vegans transitioned by sliding down the plant-based slope. A number of cute neologisms can inspire you to make easy yet meaningful changes. Reducitarian, flexitarian, Chigan, Chegan, plant strong, and even vegan-ish. I used to say that I was a sometimes-tarian. I'm surprised they don't have that. I'm going to change my light. One moment, please. Let's see. No, but that's kind of intriguing. Let's see the magic. Huh. Ooh, it's hot in here. That's what I was looking for. I kind of just like that cool mirror instead of like that face of the sun look. And you're like, wait, Jules, you just like busted the illusion. I thought all the light was you. Would that it be true? If any of these terms resonates with you, just grab a hold of it and start thinking along those lines. Those are all hyperlinks, by the way. Several other related concepts may also prove helpful, including Meatless Mondays, which seriously, just being meatless on a Monday helps the planet. Mark Bittman's Vegan Before 6, or let's certainly say Freely the Banana Girls, oh my gosh, Raw Till 4. So Vegan Before 6 plan, or trying out a vegan diet for a week or a month. Why go beyond plant-based? I'm glad you asked. Plant-based diets make all kinds of sense, but let's consider the advantages of going further and becoming vegan. When you eat vegan, you slam the door shut on countless disagreeable things, especially animal suffering, animal cruelty, and agribusiness. Like vegans, most meat eaters recoil from animal cruelty and consider it abhorrent. Unfortunately, extraordinary cruelties occur throughout the meat, dairy, and egg industries and slaughterhouses. Even the few that adhere to the best standards are invariably horrifying. I mean, let's consider the end game. It's death, and it's not just death, it's murder, right? For the convenience of humans eating whatever, however much, whenever they want. Countless vegans spent decades blissfully devouring meat and other animal products until one day they encountered a slaughterhouse video. Just a brief look at any of those videos can inspire instantaneous dietary change. Like Cowspiracy, they ain't playing, okay? Writing cannot adequately convey the horrors of the industrialized animal slaughter. The more detailed and accurate the written description, the more overwrought and implausible it often sounds. So, to truly understand what happens at slaughterhouses, you must actually witness the killing rather than merely reading about it. And of course, in those videos, you can do that. One moment. YouTube posts dozens of videos showing the slaughter of every type of farm animal, and many people can only last a few seconds before turning away. Yeah, I watched one where they were literally beating an animal to death with a club, and I lost my mind, but I stayed, right? Because it's the reality. It's just so horrific how they dim the lights to reduce the, not insulin, what is it? Adrenaline in the chickens before they kill them, because heaven forbid the meat won't taste as good if it's full of adrenaline from fear, right? The way they literally slice the cow's necks and just have them draining all the blood down the line because, again, the meat won't taste as good. And also, if you don't drain their blood first, like, it's required that you drain their blood, like, while their heart's still beating. I mean, it's just, oh my goodness, it's just, I've never eaten meat since, I can honestly say that. I've slipped with a milk product or an egg in something that I've consumed, but no. And that's been rare too, and one day it'll never be. But the meat, zero way. Many people can only last a few seconds before turning away, but what happens to the animals is right there for everyone to see, for anyone willing to look. If we're going to eat meat, don't we each share an ethical obligation to see for ourselves how it's produced? And I say yes. I mean, truly, if people had to go back 100 years where they literally had to get the animal, skin the animal, prepare it themselves, very little would be consumed. It's all the cute little packaging, the happiness, and California used to have a Happy Cows campaign, and it was the funniest campaign. I mean, watching those cows, I couldn't get enough until I realized how incredibly miserable cows actually were. And luckily, PETA and different groups fought to get those commercials removed. If you oppose violence, a vegan lifestyle deserves your careful consideration. Nothing that follows can adequately describe the realities of a slaughterhouse, but I can at least lay out the essentials. Cows, pigs, and chickens are each slaughtered using different methods. We'll start by considering how these animals are stunned prior to slaughter. Standard slaughterhouse stunning methods. When a beef or dairy cow steps onto the kill floor, a worker puts a captive bolt pistol to the animal's forehead. This trigger pulled, a steel rod shoots through her skull, instantly inflicting a massive brain injury. A chain then hoists the cow into the air, and another worker cuts her throat. This is what I've seen. And over the following minutes, she bleeds out as her still pumping heart gushes blood onto the floor. I watched that. I know that's completely true. Although horrifying to witness, captive bolts are the least inhumane slaughterhouse stunning method. Some pig slaughterhouses also use captive bolts, but many instead knock the animals out with carbon dioxide, which, hello, isn't that just right out of the Holocaust? A gratuitously inhumane practice, which is a hyperlink. Videos taken at these facilities show panicked pigs desperately trying to push their snouts out of the carbon dioxide chamber to breathe fresh air. You can imagine as their lungs are just constricting. Oh my gosh, as an asthmatic, it scares me to death. Still, other pig slaughterhouses jolt the pigs with electricity, which raises the question of whether the stunning adds to rather than diminishes total suffering. It really does get me so bad, especially the breathing, because I just know the fear, let alone having my Jewish heritage and my Russian Jews and stuff that didn't make it through. It just can't be. It can't be. And then it says, chicken slaughter is especially heartless. Chicken producers say they stun their birds prior to slaughter, but they don't really. Their so-called stunning is actually done to speed up slaughter and probably only compounds the bird's misery. Let's take a step back to look at what's really going on. In the United States, chickens are exempt from the Humane Slaughter Act. Why? Anything goes, and the industry has no worries about facing cruelty prosecutions. The birds are hung upside down with their feet inserted into steel shackles. I've seen it. They just grab one after another and just put them up. And then they whiz down the line at rates of at least 175 birds a minute, which is a hyperlink. At 3 birds a second, chickens come down the line far too quickly for workers to be able to cut throats by hand, so it's all done mechanically. How convenient, right? So how do you get a panicked, thrashing bird suspended upside down to relax her neck to be in a proper position for the mechanical blade? That's what the slaughterhouse's stunning comes in. Just before reaching the blade, the chicken passes through an electrified water bath. The electric shock stuns the bird momentarily, just long enough for the head to hang limply to expose its throat to the blade. If, however, the blade misses the neck, the chicken will be fully conscious a couple minutes later when he drops into a tank of scalding water used to remove feathers from the carcasses of freshly killed birds. Considering producers kill tens of billions, let's get that down. Tens of billions of chickens a year worldwide, no doubt millions of these birds have scalded to death after a botched slaughter. This next part freaks me out too because I've seen this. So that the Jews can keep the animal meat kosher, it's supposed to be based on how the animal is killed. And there's nothing good about this. It says kosher and halal slaughterhouses don't stun animals prior to slaughter, since scripture requires the animals bleed out while fully conscious. This leads to all sorts of deeply disturbing slaughterhouse practices, as one hidden camera investigation, hyperlink, after another has revealed. No matter the slaughter method, the underlying reality remains constant. All meat comes from animals who arrived at the slaughterhouse desperately wanting to live. When unloaded from the trucks, every cow or pig invariably looks frantically about, seeking a direction to scramble to safety. But their only path forward leads to the blade. I can't say it any better than I did in my first book. I have to believe the knife is as sharp to them as it is to us. Of course. Slaughter of layer hens and dairy cows. Meat obviously necessitates slaughter, but so does milk and eggs. The only difference is that meat comes from animals who have been killed, whereas milk and eggs come from animals who will be killed, guaranteed. Why slaughter perfectly healthy dairy cows and layer hens who still have many years left to live? Because, as these animals age, their output sharply diminishes. By roughly 1/3 of their natural lifespan, milk and egg yields decline sufficiently to render the animal unprofitable. So they're killed and replaced by younger, more productive animals. It's my understanding that's at 3.5 years for a cow, which would easily live 20 in nature. Slaughter methods for spent hens are especially troubling since the flesh is of low value or outright unstable. Egg farms depopulate their hen houses in particularly grisly ways, sometimes even asphyxiating the birds, right? So choking them by spraying them with a sort of oxygen-absorbing foam found in fire extinguishers. And then there's crowding, confinement, and cruelty. And again, be fair and watch some of this, even if you are consuming it too. And unsettling as slaughter is to contemplate, it's only the starting point for considering the ethical issues surrounding animal agriculture. Most of the suffering that arises from meat, dairy, and egg production relates to how the animals are raised rather than how they are killed. I know that thinking about animal suffering is extraordinarily unpleasant. It's only natural to want to tune out the gory details. If you find yourself especially troubled by hearing about this awful stuff, perhaps right there is the best reason of all for you to move toward a vegan diet. As we're about to see, factory farms carry out a multitude of indefensible cruelties each year. About 50 billion farm animals are subjected to conditions that I'm about to describe. The inhumanity of factory farming. Animal advocates use the term factory farming to refer to the dominant methods of animal production used in industrial countries. While there are important differences between how cattle, pigs, and poultry are kept, most of these animals are raised at factory farms. Prior to World War II, farm animals lived under comparatively good conditions on small family-owned farms. They typically received reasonable amounts of space, and most had at least some access to sunlight and fresh air. So they enjoyed largely acceptable conditions even if their lives were destined to be violently cut short. Farmers of that era didn't provide this level of care out of the goodness of their hearts. They did it because mortality rates spiked to unprofitable levels when their animals' basic living needs weren't met. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl era ushered in massive changes to American system of agriculture. Land grant agriculture colleges across the United States pioneered new methods of farming both crops and animals. Starting in the 1930s, these colleges began teaching farming with the same rigor applied to the scientific disciplines. And as a new generation of farmers studied subjects like chemistry and biology, everything about plant and animal farming changed. The petrochemical-based Green Revolution that occurred from the 1930s to the 1960s unleashed massively increased crop yields. Standards of living improved worldwide, while surging agriculture production probably averted numerous famines. But within animal agriculture, the new farming methods pioneered during this period brought animal suffering to unconscionable extremes. Meat, milk, and eggs get cheaper than ever. Factory farming created efficiencies that significantly decreased the price of animal products. People responded by eating more meat, milk, and eggs than ever before, while animal welfare standards simultaneously collapsed. Only producers who slashed costs to the bare minimum could survive. Starting in the 1930s and continuing for more than half a century, thousands of meat, dairy, and egg producers quit business every year. The dairy industry offers a prime example of the relentless financial pressure that farmers face. Between 1980 and 2020, so 40 years, the number of U.S. farms with at least 10 dairy cows dropped by about 75%. In 2017, one regional dairy cooperative sent out suicide prevention letters after 2 of its members killed themselves. To stay afloat financially, meat, dairy, and egg producers cut expenses wherever possible. That means packing more animals into tighter spaces than ever. Crowding at the factory farms. No farming cruelty exceeds those carried out by the egg industry. In countries and states that haven't yet outlawed the practice, egg farms keep their hens in battery cages that provide less floor space per bird than a sheet of printer paper. Worse yet, the flooring of these cages is crisscrossed wire. The hens sleep pressed against this wire, commonly developing open sores and extensive bruising, and never enjoy a moment of comfort for their brief life. Pigs face comparably appalling living conditions, especially breeder sows. These sows often spend their entire lives in gestation and farrowing crates. Standard crates impede any sort of normal movement. In fact, they are so narrow that the sow lacks sufficient space to even turn around. We know that these animals are at least equivalent to a 3-year-old. They're very intelligent. They know that they're trapped. They know they have no hope. I mean, seriously? Cattle confinement. What about the cows and cattle? Whether in person or in movies, we've all seen cows grazing scenic hillsides. Beef cattle are the only farm animals that nearly always live the majority of their lives outdoors. Some dairy cows also spend much of their lives outdoors, but many dairies intensively confine their cows for their entire lives and never let them outdoors to graze. Although they graze freely outdoors for the first part of their lives, beef cattle are invariably finished at feedlots. There they live out their final 3 or 4 months crowded into filthy barren plots of land. One such feedlot is the notorious Harris Ranch in California, which if you've ever driven up the 5 freeway, you've seen it and smelled it long before you got there. That's adjacent to the Interstate 5 in Southern California. Having driven this stretch of interstate countless times, I have often smelled the stench of the feedlot from several kilometers away. The feedlot covers a vast expanse of land with long stretches crammed with animals amassed on black manure-coated earth. If you've seen one feedlot, you've seen them all. Any large feedlot is indistinguishable from what you can see at Harris Ranch. I'm so sorry. Conditions are comparably dreadful at many dairy farms. There are two kinds of confinement-oriented dairies. One kind keeps the cows under roofing and chained in stalls. The other kind is nearly indistinguishable from beef feedlots, with the cows fenced onto the land coated with blackened, trampled manure. Intensively confined dairy cows have no opportunity to graze pasture and are instead fed silage out of troughs. Twice a day, they're herded indoors and hooked up to milking machines. That's what I just witnessed for 3 years. I was driving by that every day, twice a day. And all of a sudden, overnight, that entire dairy was empty. And I was like, what happened? And they said they just couldn't make the money. It cost too much in California. And there was a lot of plant-based milk being consumed. But I still pray for those cows all the time. All the time. Mutilation at factory farms. I get that this is getting long. Turn it off and come back. Come back. Just as bullying and violence pervades poorly run schools and prisons, the same is true of factory farms. Extreme crowding incites the animals to take their frustrations out on each other. The problem goes away if you provide adequate living space, but that's an expensive remedy. Factory farms instead mutilate the animals in various ways in order to keep them from injuring one another. And they're probably going to say it, but I've heard of them removing the beaks of chickens so that they can't get each other. It says pigs raised in crowded pens are apt to bite one another's tails. Workers therefore cut the tails down to the nub and clip their needle teeth without any anesthesia or anything. I've seen this. While they're at it, they also cut notches out of the animal's ears for identification purposes. Hens crowded into battery cages can peck each other to death, so egg producers use a hot blade to sear off the pointy final third of their beaks, rendering it unlikely that a peck can draw blood. While a beak may appear woody on the outside, the hen's mouth lies inside and is full of nerve endings. So beak searing entails a partial and no doubt excruciatingly painful amputation of the bird's mouth. Some hens die after beak searing renders them unable to drink or eat. In order to improve beef tenderness, this is brilliant, because heaven forbid, right? It's not tender enough while you're poisoning yourself by consuming food that's not designed for humans. In order to improve beef tenderness and also eliminate the boar taint, which is a hyperlink, stench in pork, male calves and piglets are castrated. I'll spare you the details of how this is done, but interested readers can read this article or watch this video, both hyperlinks. Unlike pigs and chickens, stressed out cattle don't commonly attack one another, but ranchers do brand their cattle with a hot iron to prove ownership at auction. Again, in no way do they ease their pain. Some ranchers use a frozen iron that is just as permanent and probably just as cruel. At dairy, some farmers cut off the cow's tails so they don't interfere during milking, because it's just a product, right? Each of these mutilations, including castration, typically occurs without anesthesia. A local anesthetic would greatly reduce pain, but factory farm owners regard even the cheapest painkillers as prohibitively expensive. And besides, it's all leading to death anyway, so who cares, right? Selective breeding. Even when raised in good environments, farm animals commonly suffer painful health problems. That's because decades of selective breeding have boosted egg output, milk yields, and muscle growth to staggering extremes. These breeding advances dramatically improve efficiency, but the animals pay a terrible price. Early death in meat chickens. No animal is more genetically revved up than chickens, and none suffers more as a result. Chickens raised for meat grow more than 4 times faster than birds raised in the 1950s. And of course, there's hyperlinks. All of this is proven. This rapid growth severely strains the bird's cardiovascular system, and up to 4% of birds die from sudden death syndrome. You think? Animal Welfare Organization Open Cages estimates that in the UK alone, growth-related maladies prematurely kill more than 1 million chickens every single week. And they say, even if they say that these birds are caged free and that these birds are being raised in some healthy way, they don't have to prove it. They just have to be able to show that one bird out of the 20,000 per hut can see and possibly exit 10 minutes a day to say, yeah, they're cage free. Yeah. Additionally, many chickens suffer from debilitating hip and leg problems brought on by their unnaturally fast growth. One large study found that more than 25% of meat chickens have trouble moving, with nearly 4% almost unable to walk. Unable to access food or water, they die of thirst and starve to death. No one notices their plight or pauses to provide care. Time is money, and chickens who will die anyway aren't worth the attention. And yet people who have a pet chicken can't, love them so much they let them in the house. They sleep in their bed. They have them on their shoulder all the time. It's interesting because that's true with humans too. When someone's going to have a baby and they're excited about it, they immediately say, I'm pregnant with a baby. If they're not sure, or if they're not excited, or they plan on having an abortion, they refer to it as a fetus. Do you notice that? Keeping it impersonal, and same thing, just like this. Egg industry cruelty. Specialized facilities called hatcheries churn out the billions of chicks a year for the poultry industry. But male chicks don't matter, right? At hatcheries servicing egg companies, one unwanted male chick hatches for every female chick. 1 male per female. These males are useless in the industry, as they aren't of the breed that can grow profitably for meat. At some of these hatcheries, the male chicks are tossed into garbage cans and left to smother. At others, the chicks are promptly ground up alive, and that's a hyperlink. In the United States alone, hatcheries kill about 200 million newly hatched male chicks every year. And a lot of that is just ground into dog food and everything else. At egg farms, the hens are commonly kept 5 or 6 to a tiny cage that prevent normal movement or even the spreading of wings. They'll stay in this cage for the rest of their lives, their skeletons being depleted of calcium with each egg laid. One survey spent hens revealed 85% have at least one broken bone. 5 or 6 in a tiny cage where they remain their whole life. And every little creature comes from God, just ready to be so excited about life, right? Just like every human pregnancy carries risk, complications can arise every time a hen lays an egg. Thanks to selective breeding programs, today's hens lay far more eggs and consequently face far more chances of something to go wrong. One common complication during egg laying is a prolapse. Here, the egg adheres to the hen's internal organs, which will get pushed out during laying along with the egg. Ouch. Nearly all hens afflicted with the severe prolapse will suffer a lingering death from blood loss or infection. If they're lucky, they'll be noticed and discarded atop a pile of dead hens. But in most cases, they take their dying breaths trampled by cage mates while lying pressed against their cage's wire floor. In the United States alone, millions of hens die like this each year as a result of prolapses and other conditions. Mastitis in dairy cows. Dairy cows likewise suffer numerous maladies brought on by selective breeding. Today's cows may look the same as yesterday's, but they produce over 4 times more milk per animal than they did their counterparts in 1950. These extreme milk yields cause a variety of health problems, most common of which is an infection of the udders known as mastitis. Udder infections dramatically increase the number of somatic cells in milk. Lay people have a more plain spoken word for somatic cells. The word is pus. Thanks to their unprecedented milk yields, mastitis is pervasive among dairy cows. So if you want to ensure your milk contains no pus, you must choose a plant-based variety like soy milk. Again, I'm going to just make my way through this, so take a break if you need it and come back. Uncover farming videos. I've written 2 books largely devoted to examining farm animal welfare standards. Writing these books convinced me that words cannot do justice to the topic. In order to truly grasp what the animals experience, you really must visit factory farms yourself. A lot of those farms won't let you. Of course, factory farm owners don't want the public to witness what's going on. Most of these places, therefore, forbid visitors. That's straight up. Thankfully, the world has people like my friend Cody Carlson. Cody switched to a vegan diet at the age of 19. A few years later, he took a job at a large dairy farm in upstate New York. He worked there for a month, then left to work in a pig breeding facility in Pennsylvania. After that gig ended, he got jobs at 2 different egg farms. Cody's choice of diet was not the only thing that set him apart from his co-workers. The other difference was that each day when Cody arrived at the job, he wore a hidden camera. What happens when you take people who lack decent employment opportunities, pay them a pittance, and put them in a stressful work environment with minimal supervision? All too often, they take out their frustrations on the animals. This is so true. The atrocities that undercover investigators like Cody have uncovered at factory farms are endless. I've seen videos showing turkeys being sexually violated. The devil is so real. I've witnessed mother cows punched in the face. I've watched animals kicked, jabbed with pitchforks. These are hyperlinks, people. They have the video of sexually violated, punched in the face, jabbed with pitchforks. Do you dare? You can't take back what you see, but maybe you need to see some of this. And laughed at while bleeding to death. I've even seen a worker strike a defenseless calf between the eyes with a pickaxe on the order of his boss. And all of this barely touches on the things that I've seen. I could go on and on with more examples. You know, they always say serial killers start small. They start by killing bugs, then small animals, and ultimately people. You know, it's the same thing. When you become numb to killing billions of animals a day, where can you go from there? How do you up the thrill? Few jobs are as traumatizing as that of an undercover animal cruelty investigator. Yet many activists have stepped up to do this work. They've collectively shot hidden camera videos at every type of animal farm, from chicken hatcheries to cattle feedlots to pig farms. Still, other undercover investigators have taken jobs at slaughterhouses and fishing boats. No matter where these investigators show up, staggering cruelties reveal themselves. I know it, and I absolutely believe it. YouTube hosts a vast assortment of undercover videos that expose the poultry and livestock industry's unending cruelties. One video after another captures appalling conditions and sadistic behavior by workers. Typically, whenever a new undercover video goes public, the guilty company clutches its pearls and promptly fires the workers caught abusing animals. While these firings are invariably well-deserved, they conveniently shift blame away from the ownership. Yet the root of the problem is not with any individual worker. It's invariably management that allows or even encourages these cruelties. Factory farms are owned and operated by people willing to inflict unfathomable pain and suffering onto animals for the sake of cutting cost. And yes, we can absolutely go there. But can we go even farther and say that if there was no demand, there would be no factory farm? And, you know, I think about it because I'll say I'm all for women's rights, and I don't want to reduce women's rights, but that doesn't mean I'm pro-abortion. And what I say is, They can have an abortion clinic on every corner, open 24/7, but no woman need frequent it, right? And same thing. All of these places would be nil and void, but for us wanting to consume dead animals. All right, mass casualty events. Not every farm animal dies in a slaughterhouse. Millions each year, accidentally or deliberately, in mass casualty events. These include barn fires, sinking ships, and ventilation shutdowns. And I've seen that, where a ventilation shutdown killed 20,000 chickens per hutch. And it was like 5 or 6 hutches. And the people did cry, but were they crying for the death of that or the loss of the money? And it's super dangerous. Like that guy was saying, the undercover investigators, at least 18 in that Seaspiracy, at least 18 people who were supposed to be observing the treatment of, the fish and things were murdered. It's too much of a threat. All right, fires. Poultry barns are so densely stocked that just one fire can kill more than 100,000 birds. Because again, they have tons of them all put in there with 20,000 per thing. The Animal Welfare Institute calculated that fires killed more than 1.4 million farm animals in 2020 alone. That year, 300,000 birds died in one Michigan blaze. I think that's the one I saw. In 2022, a fire at Minnesota egg farm killed 200,000 hens. Sinking ships. Just as chicken and livestock barns are prone to burst into flames, massive ships crammed with livestock commonly sink to the bottom of the ocean. In June of 2022, so this is hot off the press, people. This is up to date in terms of the statistics. More than 1,500 sheep perished when an overladen transport ship bound for Saudi Arabia capsized. In 2020, a transport ship bound for Japan sank during a typhoon, drowning 6,000 cattle and 40 crew members. In 2019, another transport ship overturned, and initially more than 13,000 sheep were believed to have drowned. It later emerged that the ship had secret decks installed that likely contributed to its capsizing, and that thousands more sheep perished than originally thought. Like 13,000 wasn't bad enough. Ventilation shutdown. And this was actually sabotage. Someone intentionally shut down the ventilation and killed 100,000 birds in the thing I watched. When avian influenza outbreaks occur, authorities commonly order the immediate killing of every bird in the region. A worldwide avian influenza outbreak during the winter of 2021-22 caused the culling of 77 million chickens worldwide. And that's culling. And I think that's a gentle, intentional killing, right? Including 38 million birds in the United States alone. 38 million. To minimize labor costs, farmers often employ a shockingly barbaric killing method known as ventilation shutdown. Again, hyperlink. Here, all ventilation is cut off. Temperature spike, and the animals cook to death. It's like killing dogs by locking them in a car during a heat wave, only crueler, since the animals usually take 3 to 4 hours to die. Some farmers wheel propane heaters into the barns to hasten the death. Yeah, that's what I saw. But it turned out it was the sabotage of an angry worker who turned off the ventilation. Ventilation shutdowns were also used to kill thousands of pigs in 2020, when supply chain breakdowns arising from the COVID pandemic rendered farmers unable to transport animals to slaughter. It's just a product, right? All the edges rough. Factory farms minimize expenses at every opportunity. These efforts play out in all sorts of distressing ways. No matter where in the system an animal may be, agonies and discomforts so fuse every moment. There is not one softer corner, nothing without an edge, no flicker of respite. Again, just turn this off and take a break and come on back if you need to. But I was remembering, I used to just blatantly say, well, humans have a right. I mean, biblically it says we can eat animals. So, it's okay. As long as they have like a happy life up until you kill and slaughter them and eat them. People schooled me on that. But also, I just realized it ain't Jesus's world today, right? I mean, sure, some of the apostles ate fish, and Jesus certainly used fish as various examples. I don't know if he actually consumed it himself. He may have. But it wasn't full of mercury and parasites the way it is today, right? I mean, everything today, because of the antibiotics, because of the short, cuts they've attempted to take, is exponentially more toxic and poisonous to all of us than it ever was. So, factory farms minimize expenses at every opportunity. These efforts play out in all sorts of distressing ways, no matter where in the system an animal may be. Agonies and discomforts suffuse every moment. There is not one softer corner, nothing without an edge, no flicker of respite. This essay is intended to be read in one sitting and therefore lacks space to adequately explore the endless cruelties that occur within animal agribusiness. I haven't room to talk about what happens to the hundreds of thousands of pigs and cattle injured during transport, who arrive at the slaughterhouse unable to walk. Nor can we linger here on the experiences of the dairy cows who watch their newborns. I was just going to say, they had to mention that. Taken away just a day or two after birth. And it's so sad. On the mom's teats, they put these plastic, covers so the babies can't do it, or they put a plastic piece in the baby's mouth when it's trying to get to the mom. It's so horrific. We likewise lack space to reflect on the runt piglets who fail to grow profitably and who are killed by having their heads slammed against concrete. They just pick them up and smack them against it, straight up. No matter where you choose to look, no book and certainly no essay can do the topic justice. Factory farms inflict every variety of torment onto the animals in their care. How do vegan diets protect the environment? Vegan diets carry a number of environmental and public health advantages. They greatly curtail antibiotic use. They feed more people using less farmland. They reduce air and water pollution, and they cut methane emissions that contribute to climate change. Let's now look into each of these considerations. Antibiotic use at animal farms. Factory farming imposes all sorts of massive hidden costs onto society. One of the greatest of these involves its constant incubation of new strains of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The meat and pharmaceutical industries share a common interest. Meat producers want unfettered access to huge quantities of antibiotics, while pharmaceutical companies want to cash these sales generate. When added to animal feed, antibiotics significantly boost growth rates while reducing diseases associated with stress and overcrowding. So, Big Meat and Big Pharma have teamed up to lobby the government to allow these antibiotic sales to continue at great detriment to public health. Roughly 70% of the United States antibiotic supply is consumed by farm animals, not humans. This percentage has been steadily increasing for years. Worldwide, the meat and dairy industries combine to use more than 100,000 tons of antibiotics per year. Many of these antibiotics, like penicillin and tetracyclines, have irreplaceable uses in human medicine. Confining thousands of animals in one space and dosing them all with antibiotics inevitably increases microbial resistance. This, in turn, renders important classes of antibiotics ineffective for urgent human medical needs. It's difficult to definitively link the emergence of a lethal strain of antibiotic-resistant bacteria to a particular animal farm, but no little doubt that meat production is associated with deadly bacteria like the MRSA superbug. My nephew Dean got MRSA right away after he OD'd. A 2018 report from the Environmental Working Group found antibiotic-resistant bacteria contaminating the majority of beef, pork, and turkey samples. They say if you take a piece of pork, like a pork chop, and you pour Pepsi on it, maggots will come out. Are you willing to try? Eating with the Planet in Mind. Written by Frances Moore Lapel in 1971, Diet for a Small Planet was one of the most influential food politics books of its generation. Through her writing, Lapie awakened the public to the merits of eating lower on the food chain. That means basing your diet primarily on plants rather than on animals who in turn eat plants. Diet for a Small Planet was the first bestseller to explore how plant-based diets can shrink your environmental footprint. Lappe revealed the extraordinarily inefficiencies connected to animal farming. She documented how feeding grain to poultry and livestock wastes tremendous amounts of food, energy, protein, and other nutrients. We could literally eradicate all starvation on the entire planet, but for what we waste on animals, feeding them to supposedly feed us. On a planet racked by crop failures and famine, Lappe argued that it's depraved to squander our food resources on meat production. Decades of subsequent research confirms that book thesis. For instance, a 2018 study determined that replacing all meat, dairy products, and eggs with vegan choices could feed an additional 350 million people. Animal manure in dead zones. In addition to its inefficient use of resources, the pollution that factory farms generate is a serious menace in its own right. Cattle, pigs, and chicken produce mountains of manure. Even though this waste makes outstanding fertilizer, its high water content makes manure too heavy and therefore too expensive to truck to distant farmlands to fertilize crops. A ton of this goes into the Mexican, what is that called? Trying to think what that's called. I'm too tired, people. It's like almost midnight. But this is so important, I just have to do it. I'll think what it's called. But it's bad news. So instead of putting it to productive use as fertilizer, factory farms usually get rid of the manure by spraying it onto surrounding fields, often at levels that go far beyond any legitimate need for fertilization. Predictably, this method of disposal tends to foul local water supplies, especially well water. During heavy rains, flooding washes these pollutants into rivers. Much of the farm runoff in the United States is carried away by rivers and ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. Thank you. Gulf of Mexico, with dire consequences. The massive influx of nitrates and phosphates causes algae bloom that create vast oxygen-free dead zones in the Gulf, literally. Areas like the Salton Sea, nothing can live. The size and location of these dead zones vary according to the season and the weather, but average more than 15,000 square kilometers. Whenever these dead zones move into new territory, virtually all fish and other marine life suffocate. That's the joke. You suffocate the pigs, and then inevitably we're suffocating the fish as a byproduct, which ends up to the human life being suffocated. The Chesapeake Bay, which is ringed by a large portion of America's poultry farms, experiences problems comparable to what occurs in the Gulf of Mexico. Animal agriculture contribution to climate change. Of all the environmental reasons to embrace a plant-based diet, the strongest was unknown until recently. Scientists consider livestock production a leading cause of climate change. The 74 billion farm animals raised worldwide each year collectively spew massive amounts of methane into the atmosphere. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas that traps at least 30 times more atmospheric heat than an equal amount of carbon dioxide. I have to tell my dog to be quiet. My husband's going to freak. Estimates vary regarding the percentage of climate change attributable to animal agriculture, but a comprehensive United Nations study pegged the industry contribution to the problem at about 14.5%. Over the past few decades, improved efficiencies in livestock production have decreased emissions per animal, but regardless, animal agriculture is still a top of greenhouse gas emitter and is undoubtedly the easiest leading source to curtail. Society can't do away with gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles overnight, nor can we abruptly convert to carbon-free sources of electricity, but switching to a plant-based diet is easy and can deliver superior nutrition at lower cost. Plant-based diets therefore deserve recognition as the most realistic opportunity to rapidly cut greenhouse emissions. Air pollution associated with animal agribusiness. Factory farms generate staggering amounts of air pollution with grave public health consequences. This hazard is most evident at indoor pig operations. The ammonia vapor generated by pig urine so degrades air quality that many pigs develop lung lesions. It's actually cuts, right, on their lungs. And that's a hyperlink. On top of that, workers have significantly elevated rates of respiratory problems. Even people living on properties adjacent to pig farms are more likely to develop impaired lung function and cancer. I've been hearing about that. Poultry and cattle production also contribute to the problem. A 2021 study published in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences determined that upwards of 13,000 Americans die each year from air pollution generated by meat, dairy, and egg producers. I'm going to highlight that because I would like to share that and upset a few people. Okay, so summing up factory farming key strategies. We've covered a lot of ground on the various costs of factory farming, so before we move on, let's review some key points. Broadly speaking, the industry relies on 5 strategies to maximize growth and profit, each of which contribute to the harm suffered by society and animals. Number 1, breeding programs. Thanks to a century of selective breeding programs, today's meat animals grow remarkably quickly. Dairy calves and layer hens produce unprecedented yields of milk and eggs. Output is further boosted through the use of antibiotics and hormones. Number 2, maximizing stocking density. Raising animals in crowded conditions plays a key role in reducing cost. Animals are likewise packed tightly into trucks and ships when sent to slaughter. Number 3, automation. A variety of technologies and equipment cuts labor costs at every turn. These include milk machines, water dispensers, and feeding animals via conveyor belt. Slaughterhouse lines likewise run at high speed to maximize productivity, and don't forget they said to automatically slice necks, right? Exploiting workers. The meat industry has a long history of recruiting foreign, undocumented workers who work for low pay and are unlikely to unionize. And 5, lobbying. Whether it's derailing environmental regulations, winning increased USDA subsidies, animal agribusiness lobbyists have an impressive track record of gaining preferential treatment for their industry. Similarly, the industry, which is often the key employer in rural communities, consistently uses its clout with local district attorneys to go after undercover investigators who expose and publicize animal cruelty. Taken together, these strategies have made animal agribusiness huge, profitable, ruthlessly exploitative, and largely unaccountable for its wrongdoings. All right, I'm going to stop there because, wow, they weren't kidding when they said it was an hour article. I'm just past the half mark, but it's such a good one. I hope you stayed with me. I will do part 2, and we're going to get through this because we owe it to the animals. We owe it to the humans. We owe it to a better way to go forward. So, as always, like if you like, join us if you haven't subscribed. Let me know in the comments below. What were you touched by so far? Did you stay with me? It's so important. I'm just devastated, but it's a good one, and I'll do the rest tomorrow. Until we talk again, just know that not consuming animal products is a blessing to you, to your body, to your soul, and therefore, you'd be blessed.